Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've known for some time that if you're on treatment, you can reduce your risk of passing the infection on. But we didn't know quite how low that risk was. So we thought it was quite important to find that out. So you're right, there have been other studies like the 052 study, which was really the landmark study in this field. But the thing about 052 is that people use condoms. And what we wanted to do was to recruit people into our study who'd chosen not to use condoms for whatever reason, although we obviously said there's a risk of transmission, you should use condoms. So we thought, what if we just look at the impact of anti-HIV treatment on its own? So we recruited 0 different couples into our study. That means one's HIV positive, one's HIV negative. And we started the study in 2010. And so the first phase, Partner 1, which you mentioned, recruited between 2010 and 2014, and that was people who had heterosexual sex as well as gay men. But when we got to the end of Partner 1 and we published that in JAMA, we'd really good evidence that we thought the risk was 0. There were 0 linked transmissions, but we didn't have quite enough follow-up in gay men to be really, really sure of the result. And we thought this was such an important thing to find out. We continued the study as Partner 2. So we finished Partner 2 in 2018. And by that time, we'd got almost 1,600 years of follow-up, which is it's a massive study. And the couples within the study had sex 76,000 times without using condoms.
That's a huge number.
It's a huge number, it's massive. So if the positive partner had not been on HIV treatment and not had a suppressed viral load, we would have expected about 500 transmissions to have happened, but we got 0. And we know that there were 0 linked transmissions because we compared the viruses in the negative partners who did become positive and the positive partners, and we know by comparing them that it didn't come from their positive partner on treatment.
So
it must
DNA.
come from someone else, yeah. We do genetic sequencing of parts of the virus, so we conclusively know that the viruses were not related. And the negative men who became positive were very clear that they were in open relationships and they'd had sex with other people. Yeah. So we now know that there is 0 risk, and to say that as a scientist is quite something, because
Absolutely.
You can't prove a negative, but we're very, very clear that actually it's 0 risk. I think it's really significant. I think actually the implications are more around tackling stigma and discrimination, which I think is something that I hope the partner results will do. I think they should encourage early testing and treatment, hopefully. Perhaps encourage people to get tested to know their status, because we know if you go on to treatment you have a normal life expectancy, and now we're saying you're sexually non-infectious. It's as if the virus doesn't exist. Yeah. It's a massive difference. We also hope it will combat criminalisation. I mean, we know that many people are imprisoned, including in the US, for assumptions of risk that the partner data set, disproves. So we're hoping that we'll have an impact in that area as well. So whether HIV positive people and their partners choose to use condoms or not, just to have that knowledge that actually you are sexually non-infectious, I think is quite a powerful message. And obviously underpins the U=U message as well, disseminates that message widely, which I think has just been a remarkable campaign led by Bruce Rickman. Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, we know that that public knowledge lags behind medical research. We're really bad as scientists at communicating this message, which I think is why what you're doing is so important. Which is why when we published the Lancet paper, we linked with Bruce Rickman and Prevention Access. We linked with the Terence Higgins Trust in the UK, and we tried to get the message out. And we actually succeeded. I think it went global. In 24 hours, everyone was talking about partner, everyone was talking about the fact that you can't transmit the virus if you're suppressed. And what we hoped in the UK, we had a campaign in the mid-80s. I don't know if you know about it. It was sort of tombstones and icebergs and don't die of ignorance, and that has a lasting impact on population consciousness. But we just hope by moving the conversation forward, updating people and saying, this is 2019, you can live a normal life, you're sexually non-infectious, really, you have to destigmatise HIV. So we're hoping that it moves the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I don't really use the term unsafe. I kind of use condomless.
Okay.
So if you are HIV positive and you're on treatment and you're suppressed, you're protecting your partners in the best way possible. So you would obviously want to use condoms potentially for other reasons, that to prevent other STIs, and also if you have sex with someone and you're not sure of their HIV status, you're not sure if they're on treatment. And when we saw that in the Partner 2 study, 15 men became HIV positive through having sex with other men who they didn't know they were
Outside, yeah.
outside their main relationship.
Yeah.
So it's really just, so I think it's part of a kind of prevention package. It's part of, taking care of your sexual health, but it's giving you the knowledge that actually if you're on treatment and you're suppressed, you cannot transmit the HIV virus. You may choose to use condoms for other reasons.
Yeah.
And I think it is just part of a package, really, isn't it? I think it depends if you manage to take the tablets as prescribed, and we know that the levels of drug in the body correlate very much with the level of protection you get in. If you take the tablets as prescribed, you can push it very, very high. I think it's a hugely effective intervention, and actually the 50 men who became positive in the partner study obviously would have benefited from it. So yes, I think it's part of a prevention package. And if you're HIV negative and you have sex with someone who is not on treatment and is not suppressed, then potentially, you should be using PrEP just to prevent infection. So I think PrEP is safe, and we know it's safe, and we know that from multiple studies. We know you have to manage it. If you're taking PrEP, then you obviously need to be reviewed every 3 months. You need to get HIV tested so that you can pick up early infections. You need to get your renal function checked at baseline. And we know there's some key populations that perhaps, young gay men, perhaps, when you're laying down bone density in your late teens, something to be aware of. But it's a very safe intervention. So I think it's part of the prevention package, and anyone who's at risk of HIV infection should have access to PrEP. There was a study from Australia which looked at STIs in gay men before they went on to PrEP, during PrEP and afterwards. And a lot of the increase in STIs that we see in people in PrEP is because they're being tested regularly. And we also know that a lot of the STIs were in a small group of men on PrEP, and that half of the men on PrEP got no STIs. So I think it's identifying who's potentially at greater risk, perhaps having chats about situations where they may be at risk of other STIs. And as I say, it's part of a package. But to prevent someone getting HIV, I know we say that it's normal life expectancy, you're sexually non-infectious, but I think if you can avoid getting it, then that is a good thing. So I think certainly people who have access to PrEP should have access. Yeah. There's a lot of hyperbole around at the moment about the end of AIDS. Some of the headlines when we did Partner 2 was, it's finished, AIDS is finished. It's not. It's a long way from being finished. I think we have to continue our efforts. I think
it will be with us for generations.
Yeah, well, it will be, but we're also not making an impact in terms of the number of new infections. We know that we have to redouble our efforts. But as I said before, I think a lot of it is about human rights. I think a lot of it is about destigmatising, decriminalising the key populations at risk of HIV. And I think until we do that globally, then we're not really going to. I think it hampers an effective HIV response. So yeah, I think we just need to keep going. Pour more money in rather than reduce it.
Yeah.
We have the tools. We have the tools. We know that we can make a significant impact on the virus in terms of elimination, but we need to get the tools to the people that need them, and we need to make sure that everybody is included in the HIV response. Personally, as I said, I'm interested in making HIV testing easier, so I'm interested in HIV self-testing. I'm also interested in mental health and people living with HIV. I'm interested in a kind of more comprehensive approach to HIV care, so not just focusing on the virus, but focusing on the wider determinants of health and the social determinants of health. I think HIV, I think it would be fantastic if we had cure and we had vaccine, and obviously the efforts have to continue in these areas. But I think its rollout is trying to destigmatise, its rollout of testing, early access to treatment. I think these are the key areas, and redoubling our efforts, and then we really could make an impact for the next generation. It'd be lovely to have an HIV or an almost HIV-free generation coming through. Do I have a last message? I think it's been transformed. I think it's trying to lay to rest the legacy of the last 30 years. I think there's a lot of self-directed stigma, which I'm hoping with all the advances in the area that people can lay that to rest. I think if you're diagnosed, you're on treatment, it really is almost as if you don't have the virus. And I think people need to try and free themselves from that concept and just lay that awful legacy to rest and just move on with life.
That's a brilliant message. Thank you so much. Thank you for
all right.
joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. You're welcome.